but making the most of it as he did defeat Matthew Furyk, playing Mono Blue Devotion late last night. They were the last match to finish up, and we are underway here in our semifinals, Wijaya, with a Sacred Foundry.
I think it's really important for Vidi to have one of his creatures here. Even Ash Zealot does a lot of work. It's going to be really hard for him to just completely burn Jason out from 20, especially with Jason aware of the matchup, aware of the deck list, and presumably going to be very cautious with his Ravnica dual lands.
Wijaya with a mountain. You asked for Ash Zealot, Patrick. You got it. In for 2.
Good start for Vidi.
Taking a look at Janasiewicz' hand, he's got a lot of lands. Mutavault among them. He just draws a Revelation, but what he does not have is a removal spell right now for this asset, so it's going to be able to deal at least 4 points of damage as Janasiewicz is going to play a Temple of Deceit. Scry the top card to the bottom. Wijaya very eager to untap. He will do so, and we'll see what he's able to find.
A little bit of a rush there from Vidi as Jason actually does have Thoughtseizes he could have potentially cast there.
In for 2 we go yet again with the Ash Zealot. Janasiewicz goes down to 16. Wijaya with just a Boros Guild Gate before passing the turn back. This is a Mutavault. Looks like we're going to have a Detention Sphere. Not a lot of targets for that card in this deck, but that's one of them, so we'll get the use out of the enchantment. This is a Magma Jet from Wijaya. Janasiewicz is going to go down to 14.
And this is just another great start here for Vidi. Magma Jet's so important to have early on in the game. He needs to make sure that he has a sufficient number of spells, and you see him show, actually, that he's scrying 2 lands to the bottom. He needs, any spells will do. There's some he's looking for more than others, especially Boros Charm and War Leader's Helix, but it's just, does he draw enough spells?
Searing Blood the draw here. Actually a pretty poor card in this matchup, especially when you know your opponent has in their deck. Yes, Janasiewicz does know about Wijaya's deck list. Janasiewicz is going to untap those 3 lands. He'll draw an island. He's pretty land heavy. He does have a Jace to play this turn. I'll be interested to see how he wants to go about using it, if we're going to go up or down.
And Searing Blood definitely not at its best in this matchup, although it does have a couple targets, Elspeth tokens, and Mutavault among them.
Down we go with Jace. You see Temple of Enlightenment, Hallowed Fountain, and an island. The split, of course, is Temple by itself by Wijaya, and Janasiewicz says, I will take the... Will he take the 2 cards? It looks like he will, so Temple of Enlightenment will go to the bottom. That'll be Janasiewicz's turn. We'll see what Wijaya wants to do here, as likely it will be a burn spell.
And it's not going to be going to Jace, I'll tell you what.
No.
This is all going at Jason.
War Leader's Helix going upstairs. Wijaya will go to a fairly irrelevant 24, but Janasiewicz goes down to a very relevant 10, as Wijaya will untap. He's going to Magma Jet on the upkeep. Janasiewicz going to go down to 8.
And this is a tight play, of course. Vidianto definitely does not want to draw lands right now.
Vidi's going to leave, we think, 1 on top, 1 on bottom, but we will see in a moment, and that's what it's going to be. So, let's see what he kept on top. You see he's looking at a Boros Charm and a Searing Blood. Not quite sure. Maybe another Jet.
He kept Chandra's Phoenix on top.
Chandra's Phoenix, okay.
Which I actually am not a huge fan of keeping right here, as if you can't cast it this turn, Jason's likely to be able to respond to it on his own turn. If I'm Vidi, I'm just looking for burn spells.
Dissolve the draw here from Jason. That's probably one of the bigger draws you could have here. His counter spells are very good against this burn deck.
Oh, absolutely. In this stage, you know, you can see Jason's hand. He's just trying to get the Sphinx's Revelation. Dissolve gives him a huge buffer.
Wijaya going to fire off a Boros Charm here. I'd be very surprised if this resolved.
And if Vidi was going to do this, I believe that he should have done it on his own turn while Jason was tapped out.
I agree with you. If it's all about resolving those burn spells, he had the opportunity.
The only world in which Vidi's play is better is if Jason somehow attacks with his Mutavault and Vidi gets to use his Searing Blood, but that's so unlikely to be happening this turn that this dissolve is pretty disastrous for Vidi.
Scry to the bottom for Jason. As Vidi is going to untap, he'll take a draw. It's a copy, of War Leader's Helix. There's Chandra, it's Phoenix. See if he remembers the Jace trigger. That's important here. I do not think he did. Down to 6 we go.
And that's really critical with War Leader's Helix being the draw, as now
Yes.
Shock is a lethal add, as is another copy of Chandra's Phoenix. Oh, no, it does appear that the trigger will announce.
All right, so he goes down to 7. All right, Jace, you're going down. 2, 3, Revelation, Jace, and Elspeth. It's going to be a pretty easy split here for Wijaya, which is Sphinx Revelation by itself as one of the most important cards in the matchup. But because Jason already has 2, I wouldn't be surprised if he had taken the other 2 cards, but he's going to go with the Revelation.
I actually think 6 mana, gain 3 life is better than either Jace or Elspeth in this spot. So even though it's a redundant copy of Sphinx's Revelation, it's all he's really looking to do.
Jason's going to resolve the Revelation right now. Reason being is he does not want to get Skullcracked, so he's going to go up to 10. He's going to draw 3 cards. He probably has a discard here, but that's okay, because all he cares about is getting the life.
Yeah. Heads up play by Jason.
So there will be some discarding in order here momentarily. But Janasiewicz is going to end his turn at 10 life and 7 cards in hand. So a pretty good spot to be in right now. Discards a Thoughtseize among other cards.
So Vidi's running out of time here. I mean, Jason's going to start being able to chain together some pretty big revelations.
In for 2 we go. The question is, where do we go? He's going to go after Jace now. In a sense, Wijaya is in a little bit of trouble here.
And it's going to get worse, too.
Yeah,
I mean, these revs are going to start resolving.
It always does. And Wijaya just has to pass the turn back. So Janasiewicz will draw a card. It's another copy of Dissolve. That makes things even worse. There's an island.
And this is sort of what I was talking about, the issue in the matchup. It's, you know, Vidi certainly has some tools and get off to good starts, but slogging through counter spells and removal spells and Sphinx's Revelation is a challenging mixture.
This is the Doomblade. Take care of the Phoenix right now. So there that goes. Wijaya at the rate to try to fire off a burn spell to get that thing back, but that Dissolve is going to complicate things.
Yeah, I mean, Vidi's happy to pump the brakes here. It's pretty risky for Jason to tap out. He's at least threatening some number of things.
That's a crack. Yeah. So this was an attempt by Janasiewicz to gain some life. And you see Vidi gets the Phoenix back. So if Vidi has a card like a Boros Charm here, okay, but not much to do.
Yeah, I think you would have seen Boros Charm there if Vidi could set it up.
Syncopate the draw here from Janasiewicz.
And Syncopate's also a very good draw here as Janasiewicz has a really big edge on mana right now.
Yeah. There's a Temple of Enlightenment. He may have been looking at a negate there.
That was Last Breath.
Last Breath, okay. Well, both of those are miserable for Wijaya. Absolutely miserable.
Yeah, a lot of Vidi's plan to out attrition control decks revolves around having access to Chandra's Phoenix.
There's a Sacred Foundry untapped for Wijaya. Might be Phoenix time, so there that is. He's just trying to whittle away, overcome these revelations, which is obviously very hard to do. Syncopate's going to make that Phoenix look pretty bad. 1 for 3 will be pretty delightful here. And Wijaya just has to pass the turn back now. So his Phoenix is gone for good. And Janasiewicz, excuse me, definitely in the driver's seat right now as he does draw a Last Breath.
And if he is able to resolve this last revelation in hand for a substantial amount, that might be a deficit Vidi can't overcome.
Yeah, that in combination with the Dissolve makes things very difficult. Also, Last Breath being able to target Mutavault to gain 4 life.
Yeah.
It depends on the timing of that, of course, if Vidi does have the mana up for Searing Blood and all that good stuff, but just the threat of being able to gain 4 life, and if it does resolve, makes things very, very difficult for the red-white burn player. So, Janasiewicz passes back with a bunch of lands up. Boros Charm the draw here for Wijaya. And just passes the turn back. Janasiewicz patient. Not trying to resolve anything here.
Yeah, I like this patience from Janasiewicz because with the Dissolve in hand, he has a lot of insurance, and the Revelation is also an insurance spell of sorts. He can gain life at instant speed, so no reason to tap out and play into the jaws of a Skullcrack or, Skullcrack plus Boros Charm.
Yeah, it's a bit of a game of chicken here, as there's Boros Charm being placed in the stack. Who moves first is basically the big question that's being asked. Dissolve means that Jason will.
Yeah.
So he's going to counter the Boros Charm.
Vidi kind of has to move first here because Jason has way more dangerous draws, and at some point, mana becomes a bottleneck for Vidi, depending on how his hand builds up. The same is not true for Jason, who's going to be able to make more land drops, and because he just has more lands in his deck.
Wijaya does have another Skullcrack in his hand, so things get a little bit interesting here. And this passes it back to Janasiewicz. Janasiewicz will untap those lands. He's going to take a draw here. A lot of mana in play, has a Revelation that he really wants to resolve, draws a Dissolve for the turn, so a very important draw step there. Again, as you mentioned right at the top, the counterspells are huge in this matchup. We'll try again to take a look at the graveyard to probably see how many Revelations, how many counterspells have you cast. When you take a look at Janasiewicz's deck list, he does have 4 copies of Dissolve. He has 2 Syncopates, obviously has 4 Revelations, so those are the most important cards, especially in game number 1.
And you might see Jason try to go for a smaller Revelation here with Dissolve backup.
It looks like he wants to cast one.
Completely tapping out is risky, but if he completely taps out, he'll have to end up discarding a substantial number of cards anyway, and having a Dissolve to fight against Skullcrack is really valuable here.
So this Revelation is going to be for 4, and he's leaving Dissolve mana up. Wijaya is looking at a Skullcrack. He also has a War Leader's Helix, so he's going to fire off Skullcrack right now. That's going to get dissolved. Janasiewicz really telegraphing the counterspell, but it's worth it because it's really good.
There's nothing else for Vidi to do here.
Yeah.
He has to try to do something. He can't just let Jason gain 4 and draw 4 uncontested.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. You saw Syncopate, Jason, Elspeth, and then a land. Wijaya's going to untap here. Could have resolved War Leader's Helix this turn if he wanted to. He chose not to. Detention Sphere, the last draw for Jason. You see Jason organizing the mana here. And this is kind of interesting because it seems like at some point the Searing Blood's going to get turned on. But again, that's not necessarily true. Like if you play Elspeth and make a token, you're turning Searing Blood on. If you activate Vidianto to attack, you're turning Searing Blood on. You're also turning your own Last Breath on to counter Searing Blood. But we might just see a game here with Jason where he doesn't ever play those cards and just tries to win the game with his 1/8 Aetherling.
Yeah, I think that's a really good plan for Jason here. Or eventually, maybe he finds the 4th Revelation and gains enough life where Searing Blood no longer matters. And then he can start trying to attack with Mutavault or deploy Elspeth or what have you.
Well, speak of the devil, it shall appear. Aetherling is the last card turned over from Jace. But Janasiewicz has no interest in that card. That's going straight to the bottom of his deck. Going to take a Doomblade and a Mutavault.
It's also feasible for Jason to simply win by going ultimate with Jace.
Yeah, it'll take a little while, but it's definitely feasible. We saw it yesterday from Sam Pardee.
Yeah. Because Vidi at this point can't afford to use resources attacking Jace. That's going to be in play for as long as Jason wants to be, essentially.
See, Jason's going to be discarding here. Just trying to figure out what to discard. See him looking at a hand, multiple Elspeths over there. He's going to discard Supreme Verdict. War Leader's Helix is going to get fired off here from Wijaya. And unsurprisingly going to get syncopated, which means Jason will not have to discard. And that War Leader's Helix is exiled, so we'll make sure that that is appropriate here momentarily. Not a huge deal, but we want to make sure that's correct, as here's a Temple of Triumph.
And Vidi's running really light on resources now. You can see his hand is just Magma Jet and Searing Blood.
Well, there's also one thing to keep in mind here too, Patrick, which is the closing speed from Jason's deck is not very high. Now, if Jason does find that last copy of Sphinx Revelation, things get a little bit ugly, but he's used 3 copies of Dissolve. He's used both his Syncopates. He's used 3 Revelations. As far as relevant cards go, he's got 1 Rev and 1 Dissolve left.
Yeah, which calls into question, if Jason was going to have to discard anyway, maybe it was correct to take that Aetherling last turn.
Yeah.
And try to close the game out. I mean, he does have a lot of life to work with, relatively speaking, but it's not unlimited. Vidi could definitely chain together some top decks and make this kind of harrowing for Jason if he doesn't find another counter spell or another Revelation.
Looks like Jason kept the card on top very quickly from that Temple of Deceit. Now he's going to start tapping some mana. It looks like it might be Elspeth time, which means that Searing Blood becomes a magic card again, which is important. And there is the Sun's Champion. So, obviously going to tick up. 3 soldiers are going to come into play. We'll see with Janasiewicz's hand again. He's got Doomblade, Detention Sphere. A lot of cards that are just not so good right now. And for Wijaya, it's obviously all about just drawing burn spells. He's going to fire off a Searing Blood.
And I had to imagine we're going to see Last Breath here.
Yeah. I am with you on that one.
Last Breath was a card this weekend that I felt was going to go up in stock in response to Red White Burn. A good answer to Ash Elliott, Chandra's Phoenix, and targeting your own Mutavaults and Elspeth tokens is another dimension.
And so the interaction there is that Searing Blood only has 1 target. It's the creature. If the target is removed, the 3 damage doesn't go upstairs. So Last Breath is actually going to gain Janasiewicz 4 life. So he's going to go up to 15. And now I think he's comfortably in the driver's seat.
Yeah. PD very low on resources. And there's the last Revelation in it too.
That's why he kept the card on top. That's just good scrying.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
I agree with that decision.
Jason's going to turn over 3 lands. See Temple versus. Obviously, Jason and Vidianto are pretty good friends here.
Yeah. Sphinx's Revelation for 47, probably better than the average draw in Jason's deck, so I'd really like leaving it on the top.
Debatable. Debatable. As he plays a Temple, looks at Detention Sphere. You see Vidianto's going to take a look at his graveyard. Detention Sphere is going to go to the bottom from the scry.
Yeah, this is my experience playing Burn against Esper is you have a couple good turns and it looks tight for a moment, and then the game's going to end with Jason being over 20 life and discarding to hand size multiple turns in a row.
What happened?
Things were going so well, and then they weren't all of a sudden.
Attack here from 6 from Janasiewicz. Gonna put Wijaya down to 16. So we do have a quick update on the Sitter-Zunter match. Ricky Sitter deciding he has no interest in losing this weekend, apparently. He does win game number 1. Esper, blue-white control, however you want to moniker it, is up a game against green-red monsters.
And he's also been winning very quickly through the elimination rounds as well.
You don't mess around.
You don't mess around.
He gets the job done ski. Time to untap some soldiers for Janasiewicz. It's almost time to fire off that big rev. He does play a planes. Looks like he's going to fire up some mutavolts. He wants to get this game over with now. 2-4. 5, 6, 7. This is an attack for 9. So we will get those light totals updated for you guys as Jace is going to tick up. Wijaya goes down to 7. Elspeth ticks on up, threatening the ultimate on the next turn, even though it isn't necessary to get the job done. Janasiewicz obviously with the revelation. And just a lonely old magma jet here.
Boom.
Down to 13, jerk.
VD letting him know who's boss.
Yes. That's key. That's key. You really have to let your opponent know where they stand.
Yeah. One last punch on the jaw before a concession.
Yes.
And there it is.
So Jason Janasiewicz is going to win game number 1 here. Esper Control up a game over Red White Burn and the Grand Prix Denver champion, Vidianto Wijaya. We're going to bring it back to the booth here because it is trivia time. You've got the rules. I've got the question.
So Cedric is going to ask you a question pertaining to this match. You will tweet the answer to that question at SCG Live, hashtag SCG Premium, and of the people who respond correctly, one will be selected at random to receive 6 free months of Star City Games premium content. It is about accuracy, not speed, so don't worry about being the first one to submit an answer. Just worry about submitting the correct answer.
You gotten good at that. The rules explanation was really just fluid. Smooth.
I thank you, I guess. I don't.
That's a compliment. That was nice.
I don't appreciate the measure of surprise in your voice as you were describing that.
There's no surprise.
Wow, it's really weird that you got good at this thing.
That was just smooth and easy. That was.
Well, okay.
There you go.
All right.
Boom.
Boom.
Question for you guys at home. Within Vidianto Wijaya's sideboard, he's got a bunch of creatures, actually. Satyr, Fire Dancer, and Fire Drinker Satyr among them. However, there's a gold creature that's a 3 of. If you can name that 3 of gold creature, hashtag the answer, SCG Premium at SCG Live for your tweets. And we will announce the winner at the conclusion of our semifinal round, 6 months of premium, to the winner, as we're going to head back to the match. And, game 1 I think is pretty tough. For Wijaya, things might get a little bit better. Now, you're the burn expert, so I'll let you analyze his 4 Fire Drinker Shaders, 3 Viashino Firstborns, 2 Blind Obedience, 2 Chain of the Rocks, 4 Satyr Fire Dancer. What do you do?
So there's 2 paths that a burn player can take for this sort of matchup. They can either try to bail on every single creature and become just a straight burn deck, stranding the Esper deck with a bunch of dead cards, or it can try to sideboard in some normal creatures and have more of a normalized game, making it a little more robust against things like Sphinx's Revelation and counter spells. VD's deck is structured to do the second thing, so I think you're definitely going to see the Fire Drinker Satyrs come in alongside the Viashino First Blades, with VD removing cards like Chain of the Rock, probably cards like Shock and Searing Blood as well. So getting rid of his more dedicated creature removal and bringing in some recurring sources of damage with his creatures.
On the other side of things, Janasiewicz has a Pithing Needle, Fiend Slayer Paladin, 2 copies of Blind Obedience, 2 Dark Betrayals, 2 Gainsays, 2 Negates, 2 Ultimate Price, a Revoke Existence, and 2 copies of Thoughtseize. Down the well we go. Fiend Slayer Paladin, well, that's an obvious one. That's going to be joining us. Blind Obedience, while, Wijaya has haste threats, as you mentioned, he could just go creatureless. But the fact that Blind Obedience can gain a little bit of life over the course of the game could be okay.
No, I think Blind Obedience is going to be excellent here. Again, Jason has access to deck lists, as all players do during the elimination rounds, and VD doesn't have any other place to go. He has so many dead cards in his main deck, 2 copies of Chain of the Rocks, 4 copies of Searing Blood. Not that Searing Blood's dead, but essentially dead, where the only way that VD can get enough power to his deck is by removing those cards for creatures. So Blind Obedience is definitely going to be coming in. Even if VD somehow removed all the creatures from his deck, Blind Obedience still may be worth, as 2-mana Extort could be good enough for the matchup. And the fact that VD doesn't have a choice but to leave Chandra's Phoenix, Ash Zealot, and bring in Viashino First Blade means that Blind Obedience has the potential to be excellent. Actually, when speaking to VD yesterday, he said that Viashino First Blade was one of the most underperforming cards in his sideboard because Blind Obedience is in all the control deck sideboards now. So even if VD will bring it in here, but this might be the last tournament that VD plays it in, assuming that he plays Red, White, Burn in the future.
Dark Betrayal, Gainsay, those are obviously going to stay on the bench. Got to like Negate in this matchup against all burn spells. Ultimate Price, good against the creature plan that VD is employing outside of the Viashino First Blades that we did mention. A Singleton Revoke Existence going to stay on the board, and then 2 copies of Thoughtseize. Don't think we're going to need those. Wouldn't be surprised if Jason actually boards out the 2 that are already in his main deck. Some pretty simple changes, I think, from both players. Wijaya being on the play this game is going to play a pretty big role here, but he was on the play last game, and Jason pretty easily broke serve, it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, it was harrowing there for a couple of turns. It was definitely close, but once Jason turned the corner, Vidi could not catch up.
Yeah.
It's not like you're playing deck like Green-Red Monsters, for example, where, you know, the Esper deck does its thing, but you're able to land a Domri or a Xenagos, and suddenly the game is close. Or the threat of Mutavault plus Gore Clan Rampager gives you some range, and if they get sloppy. The Red-White Burn deck, just doesn't have enough power to slog through multiple Revelations and dissolves once they start resolving.
So again, on our backup match, which hopefully we'll have time to get to for you guys, Ricky Sitter up a game over Brian Zunter. Sitter playing blue-white control, capital U, capital W, lowercase b,
Yes.
if you want to do that, against Zunter and his green-red monsters deck. No black in Zunter's deck. Actually, Zunter was able to defeat Jund monsters in the quarterfinals yesterday. So again, we've basically got 4 different archetypes in the top 8. You can say 3 if you'd like, with 2 Revelation decks, 1 Red-White Burn deck, and then 1 Green-Red Monsters deck. But you're not going to see any mono-black or mono-blue devotion here.
Yeah, and the permutations of Esper and blue-white control are pretty interesting to me. There's basically just straight blue-white control, and the big priority there is you get to play a bunch of untapped lands, so your beatdown matchups and burn matchups get a lot better. And then you can go all the way down to the spectrum of playing a bunch of temples, playing cards like Hero's Downfall, being a full-blown 3-color deck for the most power. A lot of people seem to be kind of landing somewhere in the middle, where they're playing more than 4 temples, but fewer than 12, and maybe they're touching a couple Thoughtseizes or Dark Betrayals on the sideboard. Maybe they're not. I know in the office we were talking about, could you build, we have these Sphinx's Revelation, splashing black for a couple of Thoughtseizes. Mark Herboltz has been on a bit of a blue-black kick, and he was wondering if you could build a deck that was blue-black, splash Sphinx's Revelation, kind of in the same way that the blue-white control splash a couple of black temples for Thoughtseize or Doomblade or whatever the case may be. Turned out that losing Supreme Verdict was too big of a cost, but, there's a lot of different ways to construct these control decks.
Yeah, black doesn't really have much of a wrath effect, unfortunately. I mean, the best we can do is Drown in Sorrow, which in today's world isn't necessarily going to get the job done. So
Wretched Bomb is also a good tool that you can play in any deck, but when you're facing down fast Palachronoses and Stormbreath Dragons and your opponent knows you don't have Supreme Verdict, it's a big issue.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And, we have seen players try to use a card like Opportunity in blue-black, Stanislav Sivka doing that to try to, supplement the fact that he doesn't have access to Sphinx Revelation, but Revelation is just too powerful. It just bottlenecks you into playing those colors.
Yeah, there's some other alternatives. You mentioned Opportunity. I think that Thought Flare is a legitimate tournament-level card, and when there's a blue-red Scryland, it wouldn't surprise me if that opened up that card to kind of appear, but Sphinx's Revelation definitely dwarfs the rest of them in terms of overall power.
That would make me happy.
A Thought Flare deck?
Flare, or just an Izzet deck in general. I haven't seen a Steam Augury cast yet.
This is true.
Maybe because that card's just not good. I don't know.
I think, it obviously depends on the exact texture, but it wouldn't surprise me if Steam Augury was a big player in block down the road. It kind of has that level of power, I think, where it could be a really good control enabler for block.
Wijaya taking a look at his opening hand. He is down a game, but will be on the play here in game number 2 of our semifinals. Looks like he's happy. Janasiewicz going to take a look at his 7. We're underway. Going to start things off with a Mutavault. Temple of Enlightenment here for Janasiewicz. Top card going to the bottom. Wijaya with a draw. Looks like he's going to get in as much damage maybe with a Mutavault as possible. That's what he's going to do. So down to 18.
I like it.
Mutavault doing what Mutavault does. Just chipping away.
But you can see Jason has Blind Obedience in his hand, so this game has the potential to be very rough for Vidi.
And will he drop the Blind Obedience right now? The answer is yes.
Yeah, he's aware of Ash Zealot, Chandra's Phoenix, and Vidianto First Blade, so you do not want to sit with that in your hand.
Wijaya draws a shock. And this is a Temple of Triumph. Top goes to the bottom. Mutavault's in for 2. Janasiewicz down to 16. Blind Obedience, when it's good, I tell you, it's great. This is one of those spots where it is great.
Well, we'll see. I mean, Vidi's trying to pace this game in such a way where he's squeezing out free damage, and if the rest of his hand is spells and he plays cautiously, the Blind Obedience may not amount to very much. But it's still likely to be a high-impact card.
Temple of Enlightenment's going to leave the top card on the top. You see Janasiewicz has Mutavault, has a Revelation, has a Last Breath in his hand. So we'll see if Wijaya can kind of see through this, not fire up the Mutavault.
And Vidi's drawn a second copy of Mutavault, which is really excellent for him here.
And there is Last Breath. So bye-bye Mutavault. But Wijaya goes to 24, Patrick.
Nice.
Lucky him.
Look who's winning. 24-16. It's a landslide.
Wijaya considering his options now. Gonna play that Mutavault that he did to just draw this turn, pass the turn back. Janasiewicz draws a Dissolve for the turn.
And I don't want to speak too soon here, but that draw of Dissolve, along with all the lands and Revelations in his hand, I think Vidi is going to be in a big hole this game.
Doesn't look great. Janasiewicz does have Supreme Verdict in his hand, which isn't going to play a huge role. Here's a Magma Jet. I wonder if Janasiewicz is going to counter this. Okay. I think Jet's really a card that, while it doesn't deal the most damage, it's kind of the glue that holds things together, so I don't think that's a poor use of Dissolve.
It is pretty valuable, although I will say that this does just give Vidi a very easy window to hit with Mutavault again, not having to play around anything. So there's a pretty big cost to tapping out here.
Wijaya drew a Chandra's Phoenix for the turn, and obviously that card's not all that exciting, but I think that's a situation where you just have to get it on the table and have it present a threat, even though it's a delayed one.
Yeah, I mean, any response that Jason has here is going to type a lot of his mana and allow Vidi to then hit with Mutavault again.
There's a bunch of mana. This is a Supreme Verdict with an Extort. So Janasiewicz is going to go up to 17. Chandra's Phoenix is going to bite the dust. And while that's not the greatest use of a Supreme Verdict, all Janasiewicz is trying to do is just buy time, trade resources, and resolve a big rev.
Yeah, all he needs to do is keep his head above water, and the rest will take care of itself.
Ash Zealot and in with Mutavault. So Ash Zealot, of course, not attacking. Don't worry, blind obedience, making sure that's not happening. Janasiewicz will untap and take a draw. There's an island. This is going to be probably a main phase revelation, so he doesn't get skull cracked. It'll be for 3. Janasiewicz go up to 18. More importantly, he's going to draw 3 cards: a Jace, a Temple of Deceit, and a Temple of Silence. Now you take a look at Janasiewicz's hand. That's 4 lands and a Jace and 6 lands in play. Does not have a lot of action.
Yeah, he's definitely flooding out, although the Jace gives him a lot of defense against Mutavault, Ash Zealot, and so forth.
Wijaya draws a copy of Ash Zealot. So we'll see if he wants to deploy another one of those or not.
It's really rough to deploy here after Jason has just drawn 3 cards because there is the risk of Detention Sphere.
Tough to say if he left those in after sideboard, though. Oh, never mind. You can just ignore me.
It's not unreasonable to remove 1 or 2 copies. I'd be surprised if he got rid of all 4. And he also knows that Fire Drink Crusader is coming in, so his removal is a little bit more valuable in the post-board games.
Janasiewicz down to 14. Wijaya trying to overcome all these cards and a Blind Obedience. Turning his threats into mediocre Grizzly Bears. Because here's a Temple. Top card's going to go to the bottom for Janasiewicz. You see him starting to reach for some mana. Will it be a D-Sphere or will it be Jace? Either way, I think we're going to see an Extort trigger from whatever he decides to cast.
I think at this point, he has enough mana where he's actually happy to just trade Mutavaults. So he's going to want to just play the Detention Sphere first.
And there's a D-Sphere with an Extort trigger. Janasiewicz going to go up to 15. Wijaya going to go down to 22 as we do have radio in. Ricky Sitter fans at home. I'm talking to you, Michael Hetrick. Wins 2-0. Into the finals he goes.
So fast.
So furious. Boros Charm. 4 upstairs. Down to 11 he goes Janasiewicz. Phoenix goes back to the grip for Wijaya. For you Revelation fans out there, we might have a mirror in the finals. So Wijaya with the Phoenix back to the grip. Has Janasiewicz down to 11, working his way there, slowly but surely, draws a copy of Fire Drink Crusader.
A little late to the party, but actually still kind of good given the texture of Jason's hand. It is interesting in these post-board games. You know, I talked about Searing Blood being obviously bad, and it's still almost certainly cut, but because Vidi's siding into so many more creatures, the First Blade and the Fire Drink Crusaders, it's way more likely the game gets to the stage where Jason has to block with Mutavault. And we're seeing it here, you know. Mutavault's a valuable defensive tool. Not clear to me that Searing Blood's the worst card in Vidi's deck in the post-board games, even though it's the worst card in his deck, I believe, game 1.
So Wijaya's just going to drop down these 2 creatures. Play a Phoenix, play a Satyr. Both are going to come to play tap from Blind Obedience, pass the turn back. Hopefully they live through the turn. Janasiewicz draws a card for the turn. It's a copy of Jace. He already had 1. Second one's not so bad either. You see he's going to organize his mana. Probably going to play this with an Extort trigger for Blind Obedience. But that Jace has really got a lot of work to do this game. But fortunately for Janasiewicz, Jace can do a lot of work.
Yeah, it gives him so much protection and so much time. And he's just looking for one of his big haymaker draws, especially another copy of Sphinx's Revelation.
There is your Architect of Thought. Janasiewicz up to 12. Wijaya will lose a life. Janasiewicz is... You see, he's got the die at 5. Looks like we may be ticking up here, and we will.
I like ticking up here. It means that Vidi can't attack with his Mutavault into the face of Jason's Mutavault. It may require mana out of him to pump his Fire Drinker Satyr, even get Jace off the table. And even if Vidi is able to cobble all this together, Jason has another backup Jace at the ready.
There's a fast keep there by Janasiewicz on his temple, saying, I want that card. Last time we saw him keep that quickly, it was the Four Sphinxes Revelation. Mutavault gets fired up. We're going into the red zone here. Janasiewicz is going to fire up his Mutavault. Wijaya does have a Shock in his hand, also has a Magma Jet. He's going to use Magma Jet, use all of his mana for the turn.
Yeah. Shock and Magma Jet, of course, the same thing, but Vidi wants to get the expensive cards out of his hand first to try to chain together multiple spells in the same turn.
It's time to scry. There's a Magma Jet, mystery card there. He's going to consult his hand. You see a War Leader's Helix, Nash Zealot, a Shock. I believe a Lightning Strike there.
A lot of burn.
And I feel like the one card he's kind of looking for is a Skullcrack, but, you know, with how quickly Janasiewicz kept his top card, you know, the thought process might be maybe Skullcrack is going to be a turn too late. As Wijaya deals the damage, looks like we've got Janasiewicz at 9 for life totals. Wijaya down to 21. Let's see what Janasiewicz kept on top. A Doomblade, okay.
Not the most powerful card in this spot, you know? Vidi isn't really leaning on his creatures. If they do any extra damage, that's great, but his game plan now is shifting into burnout mode.
Hallowed Fountain comes into play, tap. Jace ticks up, and as you mentioned, if he does do any damage with the creatures, that's cool. But if not, that's cool too.
Exactly.
Because I'm going upstairs. There's Skullcrack. Wijaya gonna attack. Jace will trigger, of course, so these are gonna be 1-power attackers.
And now with Skullcrack in hand, Vidi's got a lot of insurance.
You see both players shrugging their hands. I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. Neither am I. All right, fine. I will do something. Doomblade with Extort, which basically plays the role of Fog here because he's going to gain a life and then lose one from the Phoenix. So he's going to stay at 9. Wijaya, good. He's going to play. Okay, he's going to play Assault.
Yeah, I like adding this to the board. It's another piece of pressure. If you get hit with Supreme Verdict, you don't really care too much right now. And he still has Skullcrack mana up.
Jace. Jace is going down. Here we go. Elspeth. Last Breath. Temple of Deceit. If you're Wijaya, you're breathing a sigh of relief.
Well, sort of. I mean, even the Last Breath here is really troublesome, but
I mean,
it is not Revelations, thankfully. But
yes.
These are Elspeth and Last Breath. They're both pretty unpleasant cards to play against
And
here.
I think you know, if you're Wijaya, and obviously we have the benefit of seeing the hands as you guys do at home, but I think you know that if your opponent doesn't tick up the Jace there, they don't have Revelation in their hand.
Yeah.
I think you know that they're digging for Revelation. Last Breath going to go to the grip. Elspeth and Temple going to go to the bottom. Janasiewicz has not played land yet this turn. Looks like he might be considering playing a replacement Jace.
Yeah, I think he was definitely going to do that coming into the turn. Now that he has an additional removal spell, he may be happy to just say go, play his 2 removal spells, extort with Blind Obedience twice, next turn minus Jace yet again, and still have the backup Jace. I think that was his sequence going into the turn, but things have changed now.
Wijaya could have fired off a Lightning Strike, chose not to, just going to draw and attack.
Yeah, they're playing the game of chicken now where Vidi is worried about tapping out, which would allow Jason to Sphinx's Revelation and not have to worry about Skullcrack.
Yep. So here's some removal spells and extort triggers. Last Breath for the Phoenix, Ultimate Price for the Zealot. Janasiewicz is going to go up to presumably 10 life here.
And how much work has this Blind Obedience done? I mean, how many extort triggers and how much damage has it saved from Chandra's Phoenixes and Nash Zealots?
It's a huge. Blind Obedience is completely busted against these decks.
Oh, yeah.
So, Dust settles, removal spells take care of the creatures. Jace obviously still in play. Janasiewicz at a pretty comfortable 10. Wijaya taking a look at some removal spells here. Or some burn spells, excuse me. Just going to pass the turn back. Over to Janasiewicz, who will draw. It's a Dissolve.
And the noose is starting to tighten.
1, 2, 3. Detention Sphere, Jace, Temple of Enlightenment. Jace is separated by itself. 2 cards will go to the grip. Jace will go to the bottom. That Dissolve plays a huge role. There's a Temple Enlightenment. Jason scrying. Looked like a removal spell. I don't think that was a revelation.
No, it looked like ultimate price.
Yes. Magma Jet's going upstairs. As I do not think this will be going towards Jace.
Yeah, I would be really surprised.
Janasiewicz is going to counter this with an Extort trigger. He's going to go up to 11. Wijaya will lose a little bit. I think Wijaya is going to fire off this Lightning Strike now.
Yeah, he has to, right now the bottleneck is becoming mana for Vidi, so he just needs to start casting stuff. Almost doesn't matter what it is, just anything at all.
Janasiewicz down to 8. Wijaya, we're on his upkeep. Might have another Magma Jet here. And here's the cards that Vidi knows about. Vidi draws the card to Magma Jet. Looks like Mutavault wants to cheat in a little bit of damage, maybe?
I mean, Vidi can certainly sense that the shields are down from the perspective of Jason having counterspells. The concern here is that if he spends his mana attacking with this Mutavault and it gets killed, that's a disaster.
Yep.
Because, again, the bottleneck is mana.
Down to 6. He does make the attack with Mutavault. Pass the turn back. Still has Skullcrack at the ready. Janasiewicz draws a card.
It may not look, it may not look like it, but that was a really gutsy attack there from Vidi.
Syncopate, Hallowed Fountain, Revelation. I wonder what the split's going to be.
Yeah, neither player's waiting there.
Yeah. Syncopate and Land are going to go to the bottom. Rev's going to go to the grip. And, yeah, you better believe Wijaya is not tapping those 2 lands anytime soon.
Although, where we're at in the game right now, Syncopate's actually pretty powerful, too.
Yes, yes. Because Wijaya is so bottlenecked. Janasiewicz, I think, considering trying to resolve this Revelation on the main phase, maybe on the upkeep. If Vidi draws a land, it's a check mark. There's a War Leader's Helix. Just pass the turn back.
Yeah, you can tell. I mean, this is dangerous territory as good as this Revelation is.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of posturing back and forth. It's a game of chicken now.
Yeah.
Who moves first? But unlike the last game, Wijaya is advantaged now because he doesn't have to move.
Right, and he can actually start peppering Jason with his non-Skullcrack burn spells at the end of the turn.
Like good old Shaq.
Yeah, just shock you.
Yeah. You're going to have to move eventually.
Yeah, because I got a lot of these in my deck. I got a lot of them,
At this point right now, Wijaya just wants to draw land so he can play multiple in a turn. He's stuck right now with 2 War Leader's Helixes in his hand, but he just wants to, as you mentioned, just go peppering, as here is a Jace with an Extort trigger. So Janasiewicz is going to go up to 7. Jace's going to resolve. We're taking down. You might have a response to the old tick down. Okay.
Yeah, I like this. Right now, if Jason reveals a counterspell, whether it's Syncopate or Negate or what have you, it's really bad for Vidi. This is a really good spot for him to deploy War Leader's Helix. Or Magma Jet is also reasonable. I think I would have gone with one of the 4 mana spells because that's the bottleneck for Vidi right now. But resolving some number of spells here is a good way to start the turn.
We're going to go Jetting. Janasiewicz is going to go down to 5. Wijaya going to scry.
Yeah, I would not have prioritized resolving this Magma Jet that much right now because both lands and spells are good for Vidi in this spot. So there's not a huge pressure to try to scry and fix your draw.
Yeah, I mean, what's he scrying for? Like, if he scries right now, what's he looking to find? That's the big question.
Right. I would guess it's either Boros Charm or Mutavault are his best draws. So when you're in a place where you like lands or spells, the priority of resolving a scry spell seems a lot lower to me.
Wijaya taking a look at these 2 cards, however. Again, Janasiewicz down to 5. 1 top, 1 bottom. All right. What do we got? Rev, Island.
Okay. Well, that's another easy split.
Yeah. Rev and Island go to the hand. Rev go to the bottom. Jason says, get that Magma Jet out of here. So now if you're Wijaya, I think you can afford to Skullcrack now on the end step. Maybe, maybe not.
Well, let's see. He revs up to 5, and then if you have a mountain, it's lethal. But
no move.
This is why it was really important. You can see the difference between War Leader's Helix resolving and him having Magma Jet in his hand right now versus the reverse, where War Leader's Helix is all of his mana.
Yeah. Temple of Triumph to draw here for Wijaya. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? Can I afford to attack with a Mutavault? Probably not.
Yeah, there's just a reasonable chance that Jason has a removal spell, and then again, it's disastrous.
Yeah. It's just one big game of chicken. There is Temple. Now, the top card for Wijaya's deck is a mystery, as Magma Jet put one on top, one on bottom. That one's going to go to the bottom. Wijaya, is he going to go attacking here?
He is.
Wowee. All right, down to 3.
And it's critical now. We are in Skullcrack range.
Yeah, there's an island for Janasiewicz. Jace going to cash in. If Jace finds a counter spell, there's a negate. And okay.
Whammy.
Yes, that's the definition of a whammy. Dissolve an island versus negate.
Sort of a curious split here is mana is not really a bottleneck for Jason anymore.
Yeah, got plenty of it. He's going to take negate.
All right, well. Good split by VD then.
You see Jason move the 2 islands across for a negate. He's got a Revelation grip, obviously. Going to play a land. Going to play a main phase Revelation, it looks like. Yeah, this was the scary thing here. This kind of, when you're playing a deck like Burn, you got to get every point in that you can. And this is kind of the issue here, where he may have missed some with the War Leader's Helix versus Jet turn. Also, War Leader's Helix was just more mana efficient.
Yeah, that's the big thing is, basically VD needs to pick a spot to overwhelm his counters. In the spot where he's not playing around counter spells like he was on that previous turn, he needs to get the most expensive, high-impact card out of his hand because those are the least efficient tools he has when the game becomes about trying to overwhelm counter spells.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have Skullcrack and Shock in hand, having a Magma Jet is a great tool, as it's very easy for you to chain all these spells together in one turn.
Yeah.
That War Leader's Helix is still stranded in VD's hand, and it's unlikely he's really going to get a window to cast it now.
Yeah, 4 mana for 4 damage isn't the most, premium rate. It's a card that Wijaya needs to leave in, obviously, to get the job done. But when you have the opportunity to resolve it, I think you have to take it. As here's a Skullcrack that's going to get negated, obviously.
You just can't die with stuff in your hand here.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. You got to fire off every shot.
Rev for 7. Janasiewicz going to go up to 10. Normally I say it's more important that they draw the cards than gain the life, but in this one, it's more important that Janasiewicz is gaining the life.
Yeah.
As life really is cards. 6, 7. Fiendslayer Paladin, negate, probably the most important cards drawn there. Janasiewicz is going to have to discard. Don't forget he does have another copy of Revelation in his hand.
Things could still get hairy if he draws Boros Charm this turn. He still might have enough mana and tools to work with, but the door is quickly closing.
I think the one thing he needs to find, the gate makes things difficult. There's a mountain. See Wijaya looking at those 2 War Leader's Helixes, has a shock. Just not a ton to do.
I mean, he gets the War Leader Helix this turn and attack with Mutavault, so not a horrible turn, but you have to imagine Jason's follow-up next turn is going to be insane, especially because of Blind Obedience.
Yeah, also has Rev in his hand.
Yeah,
so.
just chain together multiple spells and gain a bunch of life, or just Rev for a bunch if VD taps out.
Just really undo all the work he did.
Yeah. So Mutavault come across here.
Tough guy Mutavault. Wijaya will pass back, maybe hoping to bluff something here. The problem here, we're trying to bluff something. I mean, he's the only realistic set of cards I think that Janasiewicz needs to play around is exactly double Skullcrack.
Yeah, Skullcrack and Boros Charm are going to be the only thing on his radar right now because Skullcrack, of course, can shut down the life gain, and Boros Charm has a very efficient rate of damage. But he doesn't have to even just play a big rev. He can just say, all right, Fiendslayer Paladin and extort. All these little plays get him above range, and then Fiendslayer Paladin can start connecting and pull Jason all the way out of burn range. And if VD ever taps out, then Jason can go for a big rev and really cement the game.
So Jason started his turn by playing a Hallowed Fountain tapped. And you mentioned the Fiendslayer Paladin plus Extort play, which is what Jason looks like he's setting up for right now. You see he's going to organize his lands to make sure he has that available. 3 and 4. Wants to make sure he has enough white sources to drain and gain. And he does. Make sure he taps enough whites.
And actually, the way that this works is what Jason is doing is not technically correct. He announces a spell, and then Blind Obedience triggers. And then when the trigger resolves, he can either elect to pay a mana or not.
Sure.
Imagine like it's playing against Mana Leak. Mana Leak resolves, and then you can either pay 3 mana or allow the
not.
spell to be countered. So VD can respond with Skullcrack, but he needs to do it before Jason spends the mana.
Sure.
Because the trigger goes on the stack, VD can then Skullcrack, and then Jason can elect not to pay the mana.
Warlord Helix going upstairs. That's going to get negated.
Yeah, no reason not to negate this, as VD has nothing that deals more damage than 4 mana. Or 4 damage, rather.
And there will be Extort. Trigger. Janasiewicz go up to 10. Still has that Rev. And now threatening some real things here with that Fiendslayer Paladin. VD draws a Mountain. Last 2 cards are Warlord Helix and a Shock, and that is going to do it. Jason Janasiewicz with Esper Control defeats Vidianto Wijaya 2-0. Red-White Burn no longer with us. No back-to-back for that deck, but we will have a revelation mirror here between Janasiewicz and Ricky Sitter in the finals.
Yeah, the matchup is just pretty rough, and VD does not have the best tools game 1. He has 2 Chain of the Rocks and 4 Searing Bloods in this deck.